Hey, what's going on guys? It's your boy, Nerd Mode On, and welcome to Star Wars Battlefront 3, and today we're going to be talking about the ultimate loadout, especially when it comes down to being the most effective on the battlefield in terms of KD, as well as being able to push out into the objectives and being fairly effective at arming and disarming them. So of course, before we begin, it's definitely worth noting that a lot of this information can change from this current time, which is Battlefront 3's beta, all the way to the full release of the game, which is pretty much about a month away. So of course, definitely a lot can go through some alterations and some changes from the feedback collected during the beta. So of course, with that said, today we're going to be actually taking a look at the DLT-19, which is a primary weapon for pretty much all of the classes once you reach level 5. This particular weapon does not require a whole lot of credits to unlock in the first place in comparison to some of its competitors, and it's actually probably one of the best weapons in the entire game. So of course, if you would like to know what the DLT-19 is in terms of what it's most comparable to in the Battlefield franchise, especially if you're somebody that's come from that background, I would say that the DLT-19 is most comparable to the AEK from the Assault category from Battlefield 4. This particular weapon is outfitted to look like a light machine gun, and it even states it in the description of the weapon, calling it a light machine gun as well. Now, one of the biggest differences from Battlefield to Star Wars is that the Battlefield franchise, like the real world, uses ammunition that is not lasers. However, in the Star Wars galaxy, it's a little bit more important to use lasers, considering that that's something that's been present from the movies to pretty much all of the games, especially when it comes down to how many have been produced. So this particular weapon does have a rounds per minute, so to speak, of actually pretty high. You'll definitely notice that it's a lot faster than a lot of the other weapons, and it pretty much melts people when it comes down to all of the ranges that you'll commonly find this weapon in. This particular weapon does not have any penalizations for moving or crouching, standing, jumping, jetpacking, doing anything of the equivalency, so definitely being very mobile is going to be very effective on the battlefield. Now, this particular weapon does have the ability to vaporize people at close, medium, and long range. However, I quickly found that the weapon is a lot better at close range, and then of course pushing into medium range you can still be very effective. However, once you get to about long range to extreme long range, I would highly recommend that you pepper the trigger, so to speak, so you're doing some 3-round burst, and try not to hold down mouse button 1 or the trigger on the console platform. You'll quickly find that your accuracy at long and extreme long ranges is a lot more diminished, especially when it comes down to your effectiveness, and you're going to quickly find that the bloom of the overall reticule decides to get larger as you hold down the button. So of course, my highest recommendation would be to do about 3-round bursts, considering that this will allow the bloom to recenter and become a little bit more accurate, especially at those ranges. However, this is not a sniper rifle, so try not to use it like a sniper rifle. So of course, transferring into some of the cards that are currently present in the Battlefront 3 beta. Now, some of these cards are going to seem very overpowered when you look at them, considering that there are not a whole lot of cards currently present. That is not to say that there will not be a lot of cards that are present when the full release of the game comes down, in association with some of the DLCs that'll probably come at a later date. So of course, just take that into great consideration when it comes down to it. A lot of this information will change when the game comes out, especially when it comes down to the amount of content that will also be added. So taking a look at the thermal detonator, this is going to be your frag grenade, so to speak. If you're familiar with the Battlefield franchise, this is essentially your M67 frag grenade. However, the thermal detonator does have a completely different animation and tends to demolish anybody around corners, through rocks, and pretty much the environment by itself. So of course, I'm not sure if that's a glitch, so to speak, or if that's actually just how powerful the grenade is. It's also worth noting that the thermal detonators only have a 9-second recharge, so of course you're actually going to be getting a lot more frag grenades throughout the entire game, and you're going to have the ability to spam them, so to speak, but of course try to use them effective when it comes down to hurting a lot of players, especially that are clumped up together, or even in the off chance that they're standing extremely close to each other, especially when it comes down to where the grenade lands. You actually might kill them all, considering that this weapon is very effective at blowing people up. Now, one of the most controversial cards that are currently present in the beta would be the personal shield. I've seen a lot of people really get angry about the personal shield and call it borderline overpowered, and even call it overpowered by itself. Now, of course, that's considering that there is not a whole lot of accessories and cards that are currently available in the game, so as of the moment, I would definitely agree and say it's a little too powerful, but when the game does fully release, I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal as people are currently making it out to be. So of course, the personal shield does permit you to have the ability to absorb a lot of the incoming shots from a majority of the weapons currently present in the beta. This can be especially effective when it comes down to getting away from engagements that are too hairy, or even pushing up to objectives, especially when it comes down to those final moments where you really need your team to work together. The personal shield also has a hidden benefit, which is definitely very good when it comes down to pushing through doorways. Now what I mean by this is anyone that is actually behind you will also have the full benefit of using the personal shield, considering that all the ammunition focused on you will also cover yourself and the people behind you while trying to push through a doorway or a really thin hallway. So of course, if you do happen to see somebody using the personal shield, especially when it comes down to it being enabled, I would definitely try to clump up next to him, considering that it can pretty much absorb anything from thermal grenades all the way to lasers and any kind of personal defense weapons. Now, of course, when it comes down to the personal shield, everything sounds really great, especially when you look at it in that very narrow-minded way. Now, of course, we can also really amplify this and make it a lot more effective and give you a lot more mobility when it comes down to getting away from engagements and even pushing onto them by themselves. The personal shield in conjunction with the jump pack, which is essentially a jetpack from other titles. Now, of course, this does grant you the ability to jump into combat a little bit quicker when it comes down to using the jump pack. The jump pack can also be used to get to some of the battle pickups, so of course if you're looking for getting a hero character, this is definitely one of the most effective ways at getting to them before some of the infantry players. You can also get onto the mountain on Hoth, which is like in between the first and second MCOM bases, so to speak, so of course that's definitely something worth noting, and definitely be looking up there. I've noticed a lot of players tend to be jumping up there now, especially when it comes down to it, and I've also noticed a lot of my teammates tend not to know that you can actually get up there, so definitely be paying attention to that. Try not to fall victim to getting sniped by somebody camping behind a rock. Now, what makes this personal shield and jump pack combination so effective is that you can actually do both of them at the same time. So for example, you can get into an engagement that might be a little bit too hairy for your personal preference. Now, while this is all going down, you do have the ability to pop the personal shield once you decide that the combat's becoming a little bit too difficult and you're not going to be able to kill everybody, or maybe you've also taken some damage. So of course, with that said, once the personal shield has been enabled, you also have the ability to pop your jetpack, which allows you to really jump backwards or go really any direction you solely desire. Now, of course, once you decide to use the jump pack, you will have the ability to definitely get away from the opposition, especially if they're infantry players, and for the most part, you should be pretty safe when it comes down to it. During this entire process, you've pretty much absorbed any incoming lasers, and for the most part, you should be a safe distance away from the combat to allow you to regenerate your health. So of course, these particular cards do allow you to be very effective at blowing people up and even getting onto the objectives. They're not necessarily completely made for kill whoring, but they do definitely tend themselves to be very effective at doing that. But I really want to stress this enough to you guys that this is currently the beta. There really isn't a whole lot of information currently out there for a lot of these weapons, and also there isn't really a whole lot of options for people to use, so you're going to quickly notice that a lot of players are going to be gravitating towards the DLT-19 and a lot of the other cards that we just discussed. So of course, at the moment it might feel like these setups are very overpowered and that everybody's using them and that the skill gap is definitely not as high as maybe you would like it to be, but of course once the complete game does come out, I think you might be surprised by the amount of content currently available. But anyway guys, that's really all the information when it comes down to this particular loadout. I thought this would be a great way for some of you new guys to kind of get a general idea of what you're going to be facing, and of course when it comes down to it, this is also a really great way, especially if you are already max level, to definitely take full advantage of the players that don't have this particular stuff. You'll quickly find yourself to be going very positive when it comes down to it, and it's probably one of the most enjoyable experiences that you might have in the beta at this current time, considering that there will be a lot of changes that will come from this point to the complete full release of the game. But anyway guys, that's really all the information when it comes down to it. Hopefully you found something in the video enjoyable or insightful, especially when it comes down to the information that we talked about. But until the next episode guys, this has been NMO, and I'm going to be signing out guys. Peace.